The date is March 27th, 1988. The arena is heavy with anticipation, the air thick with smoke, sweat, and the frenzied echoes of over 19,000 fans packed into Atlantic City's historic convention hall, rechristened for the evening as Trump Plaza. Two archetypal figures of American entertainment prepare for a confrontation that will define not merely their careers, but the very essence of what professional wrestling could become. In one corner stands Macho Man Randy Savage, the flamboyant warrior poet whose neurotic charisma and athletic prowess had transformed him from villain to reluctant hero. Across the ring awaits the $1 Million Man, capitalism incarnate, a character so perfectly calibrated to the zeitgeist of Reagan-era excess that he seemed less like a wrestler than a fever dream of American materialism. This was professional wrestling, as conceived by Vince McMahon Jr., a man who understood that the business was fundamentally about creating larger-than-life legends in real time. WrestleMania 4 didn't merely present athletic competition disguised as entertainment. It offered a complete mythological universe where good and evil, capitalism and artistry, tradition and innovation collided in ways that reflected the broader tensions of American society. The tournament structure itself was elegant in its dramatic architecture. 14 men entered, each carrying their own narrative weight, their own relationship to the central themes of power, corruption, and redemption that would define the evening. The vacant championship, stripped from its previous holder through a Byzantine plot involving twin referees and corporate machinations, became a kind of holy grail, its very absence creating a vacuum that drew every character into its gravitational field. When the evening commenced with Gladys Knight's stirring rendition of America the Beautiful, the symbolic framework was established. This was not merely sports entertainment, this was American mythology in action, complete with all the contradictions and complexities that such a designation implies. The 20-man battle royal that followed served as both overture and statement of intent, controlled chaos that would resolve into clarity. In that opening battle royal, we witnessed wrestling's democratic ideal in action. 20 men, representing different character incarnations and regional wrestling traditions, competing in an environment where alliances could form and dissolve in moments, where strength mattered less than strategy, and where the last man standing would be determined not by predetermined booking, but by the chaotic arithmetic of elimination. Bad News Brown's victory, achieved through betrayal of his temporary alliance with Bret Hart, established immediate thematic resonance with the evening's larger concerns about trust, power, and the price of success. The championship tournament proper began with matches that felt less like athletic contests than acts in an elaborate morality play. The $1 Million Man's opening victory over Hacksaw Jim Duggan represented the triumph of calculated evil over working-class virtue, a theme that would resonate throughout the evening. The $1 Million Man's character was so perfectly realized that audiences could simultaneously recognize his obvious villainy while appreciating the sophisticated psychology that made him compelling. His bodyguard Virgil and his alliance with Andre the Giant created a power structure that felt genuinely threatening, not merely because of physical dominance, but because it represented systematic corruption. Don Muraco's disqualification victory over Dino Bravo demonstrated wrestling's ability to advance stories through the very structure of its rules. The disqualification wasn't a failure of storytelling, but an integral part of it, a recognition that in a universe where good and evil were clearly delineated, victory achieved through cheating carried its own narrative weight. Muraco's triumph felt earned not because he was stronger or more skilled than Bravo, but because he represented a kind of honorable chaos in opposition to Bravo's calculating dishonesty. Randy Savage's defeat of Butch Reed showcased the complex character work that made this era of wrestling so compelling. Savage was no conventional hero. His neurotic energy and obsessive perfectionism made him as likely to be his own worst enemy as to triumph over external obstacles. His victory advanced him in the tournament while simultaneously reinforcing the psychological complexity that made his character fascinating. Greg Valentine's victory over Ricky Steamboat represented one of wrestling's most interesting plot tensions. Steamboat embodied pure technical excellence and traditional babyface virtues, while Valentine represented a more ruthless pragmatism. Valentine's victory suggested that in this particular universe, at this particular moment, Technical perfection alone was insufficient against strategic brutality. The one-man gang's victory over Bam Bam Bigelow continued this theme, pitting raw power against agile athleticism. The gang's triumph, aided by his manager Slick, reinforced the evening's suggestion that individual excellence, no matter how impressive, could be overcome by systematic preparation and organizational support. The time-limit draw between Rick Rude and Jake Roberts led to both men being eliminated from the tournament, not through defeat, but through their inability to decisively defeat each other, a recognition that some conflicts exist in such perfect balance that resolution becomes impossible. The Ultimate Warrior's victory over Hercules in the first intermission match provided a fascinating study in contrasts. Both men represented different aspects of the archetypal strongman, but where Hercules embodied classical power, strength as an extension of discipline and training, the warrior represented something more primal and unpredictable. Their match resolved not through clear dominance, but through a moment of technical complexity that saw both men briefly pinned before the warrior's shoulder rose just soon enough to claim victory. The quarterfinals began with what should have been the evening's climactic match, Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. Instead, we witnessed something far more interesting, a double disqualification that removed both men from tournament contention. The match recognized that some conflicts are too large, too symbolically fraught, to be resolved within conventional competitive structure. Hogan and Andre's mutual destruction cleared the stage for other stories to unfold, while simultaneously reinforcing their status as figures too powerful to be contained by ordinary rules. The $1 Million Man's victory over Don Muraco in the second quarterfinal felt almost perfunctory by comparison, yet it served its narrative purpose perfectly. He advanced not through superior character or more compelling story, but through the systematic elimination of obstacles. Exactly the kind of victory one would expect from a character who represented pure capitalist efficiency. Randy Savage's defeat of Greg Valentine in the third quarterfinal demonstrated his psychological evolution throughout the evening. Each victory seemed to build not merely his confidence, but his connection to the audience. The same neurotic energy that might have been his weakness was becoming his strength, his manic perfectionism transforming from liability to asset. The Intercontinental Championship match between Brutus Beefcake and the Honky Tonk Man during the second intermission provided a masterclass in character-driven storytelling. Beefcake's transformation from villainous pretty boy to beloved everyman hero represented wrestling's ability to execute complex character development over extended periods. His loss by disqualification, a victory in every way except the only one that mattered, created the kind of emotional investment that elevated wrestling beyond simple athletic competition. The six-man tag team match featuring the British Bulldogs and Coco B. Ware against the Islanders and Bobby Heenan offered a different kind of entertainment entirely. Where other matches focused on individual character development or symbolic conflict, this provided pure spectacle, controlled chaos that showcased wrestling's ability to present multiple simultaneous narratives while building toward a satisfying resolution. Randy Savage's semifinal victory over One Man Gang represented perhaps his most psychologically complex performance of the evening. Facing an opponent whose physical advantages were overwhelming, Savage had to dig deeper into his own reserves of cunning and determination. The One Man Gang's disqualification for using a foreign object wasn't just a plot convenience, but a recognition that Savage's greatest victories came not through overpowering opponents, but through exposing their fundamental dishonesty. The Tag Team Championship match between Strikeforce and Demolition showcased wrestling's ability to present compelling competition between clearly defined character archetypes, while advancing longer-term storylines about power, corruption, and the price of success. Demolition's victory represented the triumph of systematic brutality over individual excellence, a theme that resonated throughout the evening. By the time Randy Savage and Ted DiBiase met in the tournament finals, the evening's thematic architecture had been fully established. This wasn't simply a match between two wrestlers, it was the culmination of every narrative thread that had been woven throughout the night. Savage represented artistic perfectionism, individual excellence elevated by neurotic intensity. The $1 Million Man embodied corrupt capitalism, success achieved through careful resource management and strategic alliance. The match itself unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance between opposing philosophies. The $1 Million Man controlled much of the early action through calculated aggression, while Savage's moments of dominance came through bursts of creative intensity. When the $1 Million Man applied his $1 Million Dream submission hold, it felt like more than a wrestling move. It was the literal manifestation of economic pressure, the way that systematic wealth could strangle individual artistic expression. Elizabeth's decision to retrieve Hulk Hogan from backstage represented more than simple plot mechanics. It symbolized the moment when individual excellence required community support to overcome systematic oppression. Hogan's interference with the steel chair wasn't cheating. It was the necessary intervention of established power to prevent the complete triumph of amoral capitalism. Savage's final diving elbow drop and victory represented not merely athletic triumph, but the vindication of a particular vision of what American heroism could be. This wasn't the simple moral clarity of traditional babyface triumph, but something more complex, the victory of neurotic perfectionism over calculating materialism, of artistic passion over economic efficiency. WrestleMania 4 dared to challenge the formula, to experiment with format and character arcs, and in doing so, it helped solidify WrestleMania as more than an event. It became a storytelling institution. As the credits rolled and the lights dimmed on Trump Plaza, the message was clear. The golden era of wrestling was not static. It was growing, shifting, evolving. WrestleMania 4 did not deliver perfection, but it delivered evolution. And from its chaotic bracket emerged not just a champion, but a new era, crowned by a macho man, led by a valiant woman, and supported by a reluctant legend. It was the night wrestling grew up, messy, loud, and utterly unforgettable.